And awesome, we're good to go. Kathy, go ahead and take it away. Oh, and you're on mute.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kathe Petchel, and I work at HINGE Advisors. I am one of the business development team members, and what that means is I work with owners like you all or exec directors like you all every day, all day. They call me the content queen at HINGE because I'm like a little squirrel and just grab content and information that I try to share back with our industry. And one thing I love so much about our industry is how generous and sharing we all are. So I appreciate being a part of this webinar, and it was really nice to connect with Benny. He gave me a really quick version, just a little preview of Playground yesterday, and it was what I love about it is how attractive it is, and I think it is very user friendly and kind of almost gamified, which I think for millennials and Gen Zs is very attractive. So keeping track of everything we do is essential to growing, buying, or selling your business. So we can go to the next slide, and I'm going to tell you just a little bit about Hinge. Here's our latest picture of our team. And we were recently in Philadelphia. We do 2 conferences a year, and this is when we were at our Thrive conference. But at Hinge, we have lots of people in different roles. We actually have about 23 people on our team now. They're not all pictured here. The woman on the lower right is Kathe Ligon. She's our founder and CEO. We do have over 300 years of experience. And as I said, what I do is all things client related. Essentially, what Hinge does is sell schools when one is ready to exit. It doesn't matter if it's a nonprofit or a for-profit. There's a few more little complications possibly with a nonprofit, but I was just at a conference last week, and the first thing one of the ladies who is interested in selling asked me is, can you sell nonprofits? So happy to have all our nonprofit people on here as well. Typically, there's a long runway between starting your school and what I say, and I'm quoting my boss, Kathe Ligon, is you should be considering your exit as soon as you open your doors. You never know what life's going to bring you, and you always want to have your exit plan and a couple different exit ramps. So I talk about that a lot. Some of the people on this picture do different things besides just selling schools. There's financial analysts, there's people that are the brokers or the advisors, and then we've got people that make me look good when I do a webinar, creating my slides, for example. And we're ready for the next slide. Just really quick, this is something, again, I love about our industry. We try to be as generous and sharing as possible. And this was one of the brainchild ideas of Kathe Ligon. It's called Boost. And so if and when you have a staff member that is experiencing a hardship in their life, someone I know just had their house burned down, or someone's losing custody of their child, and big kind of sad life changes, please consider connecting with Boost. It's a nonprofit financial support for teachers. Just scan the QR code to find out more information. There's 2 parts we're working on right now. One is gathering funds and reaching out to stakeholders and people that are like-minded to create the fund. And then we've also started giving out money to people in tough times right now. So personal financial crises happen. And what I care about as an owner, as a fellow owner, is that if it happens, I want my staff member to be able to still come to work and not worry about paying the rent or maybe a major hospital bill. So we're really proud of Boost, and it's just brand new. So you're one of the first groups to hear about it from us. Next slide. Save the date. We love conferences. What I do much of my time is going to other people's conferences and presenting all about the content I've created or that we've gathered within Hinge. But we have our own big conference every year. This year, we'll have about 500 people. Last year, it sold out in 8 hours. That was limited to only 300 people. So if you are interested in an amazing networking event, and we're hoping Benny comes to our conference this year, amazing networking event and top-notch content because the best speakers ever. Please mark your calendar. Registration will start August 1st and it'll sell out quickly. Next slide. Um, Again, this relates to the content I'm going to talk about. In several of my slides, we'll talk about knowing your numbers and really knowing QuickBooks or whatever system you're using to track. QuickBooks is kind of universally used, and typically when one goes to sell their business, you want to have your QuickBooks in tip-top shape. We have a gal, Christine, who does training on QuickBooks, and she also does something really cool. I've actually personally used her myself, so I can attest that it was super helpful. If you've had a school for a long time, I've had mine for 40 years. Um, your chart of accounts gets a little, clogged up, and there's different things that could be consolidated to make a very clean P&L. So she actually does something called QuickBooks cleanup as well. And next slide, we'll go into our content. Oh, here's the picture. Christine's the gal on the left, and these are her two assistants that do financial coaching. And that's actually really helpful, especially if you're thinking about growing your school, which is part of our content today. All right, so we're going to talk about growing, innovative ways to increase value. And so I have so many ideas, but I'm just going to let you take notes. If you would like some of my flyers, feel free to email me. Benny can share my email, or I can do it at the end. But there's different ways to increase your value, and some of them involve money, and some of them involve creativity and sort of thinking outside of the box. So let's just do a couple of them. One might be to change up or pivot your philosophy. Maybe you've been a traditional preschool forever and you're really intrigued by outdoor classrooms. So that would involve money and a little bit of creativity. I would suggest you start in outdoor classrooms with getting some type of certification or some type of knowledge. There's so many good resources. Feel free to email me for my favorites, but I'm personally certified as an outdoor classroom project specialist and love it. So it involves really having children out in nature and understanding the real natural world. It's a great way to relieve stress, and it's a great way to get teachers really thinking outside of the box rather than just very structured curriculum. At 9 to 9:30, we're doing centers. You can do outdoor classroom centers outside all day. I love California because California even naps outside sometimes. So I've seen diapering stations outside with hand washing and whatnot. So pivoting a little bit or adding to your philosophy. Another example might be the Reggio, inspired Reggio sort of philosophy. A lot of people are doing that. If you're looking at your bottom line, that's a bit of a higher end model. Reggio is a little bit more expensive because you're doing a lot of documentation and portfolios and so on. Montessori also is a higher end that requires some specific training. Another way would be to add additional income streams. That might be before and after school care. That might not cost you anything except a relationship that you would build with your local public schools. And maybe the school buses could drop off the kiddos at your school. It could involve being a little bit more involved and buying buses and getting, bus drivers and so on. But so many times the public schools have really leaned on us, especially for before and after school care, as well as, of course, during COVID, we know how helpful we were for some of the school age children. Let's see, renovating and rebranding is a really good way to increase your value. If you are not as bright and shiny as bright and shiny is when they come in, meaning a competitor coming in, building a new building from ground up, you want to make sure that your building is as attractive as the brand new one. You've got, sort of the head start. If someone's coming into your area, you want to make sure you've updated. Preschools are kind of like fast food restaurants, in my opinion, just lots of coming and going, lots of people in and out. And of course, we're dragging in the sand and the mulch and all the messy things. We also have lots of germs. So the public school kiddos come in to pick up little brother and sister. We're adding so many germs. So really having it updated and really very clean, whether you're growing and adding enrollment or whether you're on the selling exit track, super great idea. Community partnerships, also really good. I like this one. Zig when they zag. If your competitors are open longer, figure out how you can have another unique selling proposition. Maybe you're going to go even into evening care, or you're going to go into Saturday drop in. I'm in a college football town, University of Virginia. So years ago, I did this. I haven't done it in a while, but offering childcare for during the football game. You know, parents would love to be able to go tailgate and have social time, go to the game, and then maybe a party afterwards. And you can watch the kiddos all day. That's another example of adding an income stream. I've got so many. I probably have 10 more, Benny, but I'm trying to keep an eye on the clock. I'll do one more. Um, one more would be building your bench. Whether you're growing or selling, having a built bench, which would include your middle bench, so that when opportunity knocks, you're ready to go. I'll give a really short example. I helped sell a 5 location school in a small metro area. And the gal, it was a husband wife. They had, again, 5 schools. And we did a valuation for them, which is something I'll talk about in a few minutes. In the valuation, it came out very positive. She owned her real estate and then the 5 locations. Very successful, around for many years. When I thought for sure, oh, this is a really good, strong valuation, she's going to list. Nope. She said, that is really good. And it motivates me to want to grow. So she took a couple years thinking about whether she's going to grow or not. What she first did was grew her bench. So instead of 1 trainer, she had 2. Instead of 2 people at her desk, the director and the assistant director, she had a 3rd person. She was growing her bench. So she ended up not buying any more schools. She ended up having a change of heart. Kids were graduating from college and grad school. And she said, let's do another valuation. Let's see where we are now. She had added enrollment, but also it added payroll. It turned out her valuation was higher and she ended up selling very, very successfully. So, but what I think she might have had 16 or 17 groups wanting to buy her school. In that case, her having that bench built and that middle bench built, now that owner can come in, and they've since closed and it's going very well with the new owner. Now they can grow and add more schools to their portfolio because she had it all teed up and ready to go. So that's just a great example of pivoting halfway through. I'm going to grow, but here's what I have to do. No, I'm going to sell. And, it just all paid off really well for her.
Kathy, I'm curious. I have a question. When you say grow your bench, what are you referring to specifically, and how does that impact your ability to grow or sell?
Okay, so growing your bench. So and we know, you're either, and I love this content, Benny. You're either a rainmaker, or you're in the beginning. Typically, owners are rainmakers. They're the ones that build the relationships with the parents. They can enroll with their eyes closed, or they get good at it. So a platform like a playground is really helpful with that, keeping track of everything. Same thing with keeping track of the money and the numbers. But they also, you also want to grow out of Rainmaker. You want to grow Rainmakers, building your bench, and so that you can be the architect. You can become the big picture person. So growing your bench could be always having extra teachers available and trained so that when you open that new classroom, again, that teacher bench is built and you're deep. The worst thing that can happen is, and it happens all the time, it happened to me last week, somebody is quitting without notice. I have a gal, Heather, baby teacher, fantastic at one of my schools. She just got placed for student teaching. It was a whole semester before she was expecting. So now I have a 3-week notice. And if my bench wasn't built to have someone go in that baby room and be ready to be trained by her, I'm, a day late and a dollar short, and I'm really impacting quality. So building your bench also can mean, remember I said she had 2 trainers for new teachers rather than 1. So growing your bench, while bottom line, it costs a little bit more in the beginning, if it helps you get to that full capacity. And we say no money, no mission. And we say at Hinge, the number 1 job, and some of you might take issue with this, but let me explain. The number 1 job would to be full to your capacity, because being full covers everything. You can pay your staff, you can grow, you can add the outdoor classroom I talked about, and so on. Does that answer the question?
Yep.
Great.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants more ideas, innovative ways to increase value, certainly you can email me because I've got plenty more. Okay, and so next slide, we're going to talk about what we found on our survey. And in general, we did a big survey and we actually teamed with a couple other groups, and owners filled it out. And if you would like to get the whole survey and the whole all of the content, please let me know. It's we have an actual beautiful document where we compiled all the data. But in general, these are the things that staff are doing to manage their payroll hours. We know payroll is quite a bit higher now. In some cases, it's okay, let me back up. Before COVID, we were recommending 48 to 52% of your income, your tuition dollars a month, be allocated to payroll. It depends on how full you are. If you're less than 70% full, I would call you in the sort of red area, the sort of like work on your enrollment. Because every time, if you don't have full classrooms, and again, a playground type platform is really helpful for this as well. If your classrooms aren't full and you've got staff for, less than the capacity, you're leaving money on the table. Now, that said, as owner to you guys, sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes we're having the behavior issues, or some of the teachers that we're bringing in take much more training because they're coming to us less qualified. So I'm not saying make a decision to lower your quality or lower your standards, but I'm saying when you've got the quality staff and you've got openings in your classrooms, that's money that's leaking out of the bucket. Does that make sense? And so what we found in our study is, and these are just basically general practices people are doing, and I don't think this is going to surprise any of you. 46%, so at least almost half, are monitoring staff hours. And so that means, and you get some of the ones, I call them clock milkers. They want to hang around, and maybe they're supposed to leave at 5, but they clock out at 5:30. So you want to keep an eye on that. What exactly are they doing? I don't like to do overtime. Obviously, it's the law. You have to do overtime if they work more than the 40 hours in a week. But I really pitch it to my directors that overtime is exhausting. And while staff may want and love that extra time and a half, allowing overtime regularly is a recipe for burnout. I'd rather see you overhired than overstaffed. But again, that said, you may need to be overstaffed until you have your new staff, especially, trained up. So about 46% are monitoring hours to manage payroll. About 25% are allowing staff to go home early. So as parents pick up their kiddos, if things are all complete and the rooms are closed, staff can sometimes go home early. About 19% are monitoring pay rates. So, and that's something I like to know for each of my locations. And then also for each of my age groups. So the infants, toddlers, and so on. How much the average hourly pay is for each of those segments. So maybe one of my locations is in a higher demographic. So to attract those teachers, I might need to be paying a little more. Another location is in a less affluent demographic, and so I'm attracting teachers that maybe I am able to pay a little bit less. Some people go the opposite and have a chart. This is really easy. If you've got X number of years experience, this is your pay. If you've got the next level up, this is your pay. I think there's a lot to be said for having it very consistent, because you don't want people's feelings to be hurt that you're looking like you're favoring someone, and you want to make sure you're practicing best practices with labor law. Back to some of the stats that we found. So allowing staff to go home early, is also a good strategy. I'm really careful about that because I don't want my lead teachers to go home early, because I think that engagement with the parents at the end of the day and answering questions, especially if there's been a bite or some type of injury or incident that day, that's not someone I'm going to send home early, regardless. And then the other is 10% of other ways. And I'd love to hear in the chat what you all are doing to manage staff costs today. If anyone, if Ben, you want to monitor that in the chat, and if anyone has any other ideas. Um, that's what we're finding, though, in general. We have a whole document that I'm happy to send you and send to you, Benny, if you want to share it with your members as well.
Yeah, that would be great, and we can share it out over the email as well.
Yeah, sure.
Anyone that registers, they could access that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also with this slide, I'm sharing a few things about Indeed. And again, in the chat, feel free to let me know if you're using Indeed. Most people are, not all. But I'd love to hear if you're using another platform that's working better. So at my schools, they're called Bright Beginnings in Virginia. I do heavy on Indeed. And one trick I have, and it works pretty well, is my directors each take a time of the day to monitor Indeed. I know that if I'm putting lots of ads out on Indeed, that's going to dilute my pool. So I try to do one or maybe two ads and then have multiple people check during the day, including in the evening and including on weekends if it's a heavy hiring season. And I think we're going into August. It's a pretty heavy hiring season. You're losing your school-age kiddos. You're losing teachers going back to school, maybe. You're losing teachers that might be moving, and so on. And so that's my first trick on Indeed. My second one is, and so I think I've alluded to, always be hiring. And then continuously engaging with the talent, whether you've got someone that's your HR person that's got a great personality and can really help them understand what your culture is and your core values. You want to make sure that, I mean, it's once you hire someone, hire slowly, fire quickly is kind of an old adage. The other thing I would say is hire. I do attempt to hire. If I'm not sure, I'll say, I'd love to have you try out for our team. I'm going to keep looking for candidates, and I want you to keep looking as well. And so that kind of psychologically tells someone, I've got to work hard to earn this job. But it also allows me to say honestly to someone, you don't have quite the experience I'm looking for. I'm willing to give you a chance. Please take our training really seriously, get all your paperwork in right away, and so on. And so I'm very honestly saying to someone, it's attempt to hire. I believe it might work, but I'm not going to commit until XYZ. That's a pretty good strategy and an example of continuously engaging with your talent. This is a great trick, and I learned this from a friend of mine, Travis, who was a long time speaker for us from Indeed. And it is, and you might want to take this down if you guys don't know this, because I like this content very much. Your characters, so the letters, and I think it even includes spaces, should be no more than 35 characters for a mobile search for your job title length. So don't go crazy on a job title. Energetic and creative preschool teacher. No, preschool teacher, childcare teacher. And I'm going to give you other words that are top search terms. And again, either hopefully, well, I know this is being recorded, either take these down or view this later for the content, because this is kind of liquid gold if you're struggling with hiring. So first rule, less than 35 characters if you know they mostly search for you on their mobile device. And that's certainly Gen Z, oh my gosh, and also millennials. And they're typically our strongest hiring pool. Gen Z should be at almost 30% of our nation's hiring pool by 2030. So in the next few years, they're really going to take over our hiring pool. The other rule of thumb for for online, for just your computer, if someone's doing a computer search, is 60 characters or less. And again, that refers to your job title length. Be overhired, not necessarily overstaffed. I'm reiterating that. But having people on your bench and in your back pocket is one of the secrets. Using the right keywords. So geeking out just a little bit, and I'm not going to geek out as much as Benny does because he was helping me with technology 30 minutes ago. But I do know this. The top searches are twice as many searches for daycare or daycare teachers. And I know you're all cringing because I do too. We don't watch the day, we watch the children, but that's still in the general public. That's what general public people would be searching for. So that's 50% more searches, which is a lot. Another one is childcare or childcare without a space, teacher assistant, daycare assistant, teacher, childcare, daycare teacher. So those are the top searches by clicks. The top keywords for your ads: hiring immediately. So not in your title, but in the beginning of your ad. Immediate hire, urgent hire. And I know Indeed will do that urgent banner for you. And then easy, this was a surprise to me, part-time or full-time. Those are top keywords for your ads. And then we can go to, unless anyone has questions, I know that was a lot. We can go to the next slide. So growing, I have a really beautiful flyer that I've created on growing. And I'm happy to send it to anyone that would like to email me. But I'm going to give you a couple of them. So keeping staff, sometimes it's as easy as staff appreciation versus pay. Pay needs to be consistent and applied equitably, but staff appreciation, that's where you can go crazy and have it be fun. The first part I would do on this is know what their language of appreciation is. And that's just as simple. If you get the book, The 5 Languages of Appreciation for Employees, there's a little quiz, or you could just coach your staff on languages of appreciation. So one is gifts, which we have in our slide, but most important are usually like the kudos. The actual words of appreciation are really big. Then touch would be one, that's a pat on the back, a handshake, a hug, depending on how people feel about touch. And then words of affirmation. So words of affirmation, acts of service, gifts, touch, and let's see, there's one more. I'll think of it in a minute. But those are all really important, that you know what is meaningful to someone. So for me, I like languages of appreciation, I like words of affirmation. So if someone gives me a gift, I'm appreciative of it, but I really like someone to say, wow, thank you, great idea, great job. Some people could care less and think you're just BSing them, basically. And if you go in after nap and start sweeping up under the table when the kiddos had their snack or their lunch, that speaks very, very well to someone. So, but here's some ideas. One thing would be full-size candy bars on payday. I did this for a couple years. It was really fun. I started with the payday bars and then the full-size Hershey bars or the fancy bars. When I did a presentation talking about languages of appreciation in California a couple years ago, they had me take that out of my slides. We do not want to promote giving teachers candy bars, which I thought was really funny. And I appreciated their mission and their core values. So that would be a smoothie bar or doing something really fun and healthy for your staff. So depending on the culture of the school and really like core values, we're not going to give teachers candy bars because we don't want the kids to see teachers eating a candy bar. I totally appreciate that. But that's an example. Take it how you want to take it. I like this too, food. I'm talking food again. Several of these are food. This is really successful. I do this every January. It's called Fill the Fridge. So the parents are asked to bring in assorted items that the staff have kind of pre-selected. And so I'm in Virginia. So mine like the sausage biscuits, the frozen sausage biscuits. I forget what the brand is because I don't eat them. but or the seltzer water, the fancy seltzer water, or the nice Fiji water, or the juices, or the individual packs of cereal, and definitely post it. Let parents know how much the staff appreciate being able to go in the fridge, kind of like at home, and grabbing a snack. So fill the fridge is a good one. A hot chocolate bar, or in the summer, an iced chocolate bar, really fun with some trimmings. Having someone come in and do yoga or some type of meditation kind of course, or like little mini course, really fun. I've seen people bring in massage chairs and have a massage therapist come in at break and just do like neck and shoulders. We actually do that at our shift events every year, which is really fun because you're sitting in a room all day and people really love that. You could do the water fountain like you see at airports. And so, like saving plastic, if you're really green, having the water fountain that the staff can fill up water bottles, and obviously the kiddos and parents can as well. And then last one, I do this every year. We do flowers on Valentine's Day. I order them ahead at Trader Joe's. They're like $6 a person. But they're pretty big size bouquets. And then I do a really cute Canva with all the teachers with their bouquets. And they're doing like goofy positions, upside down, or like jumping up, or, and it's very engaging. But you would be very surprised, at least I was, at how rare many people get flowers. I just assume, I'm married. My husband always gives me flowers. My kids give me flowers, my, friends, but a lot of people don't get flowers. So that's just a really easy. And again, this is a way to grow and keep your staff happy. We need to move to buy. And I'm looking at the time, Benny. When will I know it's time to buy? I'll buzz through this information because this is really personal, but it might be that you've worked your way out of a job. You have your team is seasoned. There's not a lot of fires for you to put out, and you're ready for your next project. That would tell you you're ready to maybe grow a little bit. If you've got wait lists for your teachers and the kiddos, that would be a really good time to grow, to add or buy something else. And then if it energizes you, if you really like that part of being in the preschool industry, maybe you're tired of the day to day. I know I've had my school for 40 years, and sometimes, many times, I'm asked a question, that I've answered probably 500 times. I have to take a step back, take a quick breath, and realize the person asking me has not asked me that 500 times. But it does get frustrating. And so if you're frustrated by that and energized by growth, it's a good time to buy. And so the next slide, how will I find a program to buy? Well, you might not find a program to buy, but the first thing is you're going to ask. You're going to ask your network. I just went to my private banker last week in Charlottesville. I've worked with the same bank about 40 years. And I said, what's available? What commercial properties are coming up? And my banker, Kelly, gave me 3 ideas I had not thought of. He said, oh, did you know this is coming up? This one's for sale. You could lease this in different parts of town. So having that relationship built, and not just with one bank, maybe several. And so that's a bank example. Also, of course, having commercial realtors available. They work for the seller. So you're going to be able to go in as a buyer and work with them and have a couple of the commercial realtors, on your short, quick dialing, and have them able to help you. Then you could do your network, your local childcare network, or other owners. If you're watching someone's Facebook or social media, or you're at an owner retreat or a conference, and there's a school, you just know they're amazing, and maybe the owner might be burned out or possibly aging out, thinking about retiring, that's a really good opportunity for you to write a handwritten note, or schedule a coffee date and say, if you're ever wanting to get out, I would be so happy to take care of your staff and your families, and continue your good work. So that's just a really authentic way to grow your school, way to buy. Then a lot of people use the commercial platforms, which would be Biz by Sell or LoopNet, for example. So the next slide, I'm talking about what resources you should consider if you're growing, if you're wanting to buy. So I gave you the example of a traditional bank, but it would also be considering maybe having partners. Maybe you've worked with someone that maybe has the funds and you could partner with them. You could take your platform that has been successful and maybe decide to make it into a franchise or work. Sometimes people sell their school but stay on and help the new buyer grow the school. You know the area, you know the demographics, and you would be very well regarded with some buyers to help them grow their platform. Let's see. And then the resources also depend on your size and financial strength. So the first step I usually say is number one, always get a valuation. And you don't want, this is fine for comparison, to get a valuation from the SBA or your bank. Certainly no problem with that. But going to a company like Hinge, obviously, I'm going to talk about Hinge. We have 3 financial analysts who have all been in the industry for their entire careers. So having someone that knows early childhood best practices for expense categories, and really how to maneuver around a preschool childcare P&L. That's what you want. If you want a real, true, and accurate valuation, you want to work, well, you want to work with Hinge. But you can also compare with an SBA or a traditional bank valuation, but remember, they're doing it from a completely different point of view. Both would be helpful. I always like a lot of information, honestly. So when we talk about selling your school, which I'm going to talk for a minute in the next slide on valuations. So what is a valuation? So the benefit of a valuation is you've got, if you use someone like Hinge, an industry expert that will tell you in the open market, if we were to list your school, and there's so many variables, and that's what makes it really interesting and super fun. Your school would be really well regarded because of your demographic. Here's an area that's a growth area in our country, or maybe it's not a growth area. Maybe you're a niche school, you're a small Montessori school in the middle of a winery area in California. And so that's more of a niche type program. So that we look at your demographic, we look at your license capacity. In general, the buyers that we work with are looking for larger schools in general. There are some caveats to that. California, for example, the license capacity is usually much less than, say, Metro Atlanta. Metro Atlanta 150 would be kind of a middle of the road capacity. California, 80 to 100 capacity is pretty big. So it depends. And that's what we do at Hinge, is really explain how your school would look in the open market. And then we'll point out whether in evaluation, I like it, one, because it's a baseline. You would know on those days where you're frustrated, here's probably what I could get for my school. Most days we're not frustrated, so maybe I want to grow. Here's my baseline. I can take this to a bank and say, this is how my school was viewed by an industry expert. Or it also, and this is the best part, if you're not sure, or you're thinking, okay, 2, 3, 5 years, I might be wanting to sell, we'll show you opportunities right now. So we'll show, like, you're not paying quite enough of the market rate for staff, or you're paying a lot for staff. Good for you. That's how you're keeping staff. But you need to increase your tuition dollars. You need to raise rates. You haven't raised rates in a year or two. Hopefully you all have. Or you're giving away vacation days and holidays and allowing parents 2 weeks off a year. You don't need to do that. We did that 20 years ago. That's not a common practice now. So we'll look at your P&Ls. Of course, it's confidential. There's no charge for it either. And we will help you understand opportunities and specific ways you can improve. These are 2 stats that are interesting. 50% of owners have already thought of what their number is. Now, they may be right, or they may need some coaching and advice. They may be too low, they may be too high. But if you know your number, it's easy, because then you work backwards. What are the steps I need to take to get to my number? It's kind of fun. And then 61%, I think this is a low number actually, 61% of owners have not done evaluation in at least 2 years. I don't think that's a correct number for our industry. I think most people have not done evaluation. Um, and I think it's fear-based, and I think it's sometimes we feel, at least for me, a little embarrassed. Oh, I don't want someone to know I'm not spending enough on, I don't know, advertising or whatever notion I have in my head. By the way, advertising should be about 2%. So that's a bad example. Um, um, Sorry, I'm looking at the chat. So if you're one of those that have not had evaluation, you really might want to consider it. Again, no obligation. And the next slide, I'm going to talk about what you can do now to get ready to sell, or just it's going to improve you anyway. So operating systems and procedures. Proper planning prevents poor performance. We know that. And so the more you're prepared. And this is where building your bench, back to Benny's question a little bit ago, building your bench will really help you, of course, be super organized and ready when opportunity knocks, and also to have a seamless process should you decide to sell. So a couple things would be an operations manual. If you have an operations manual, remember I said sometimes I get frustrated because I feel I've answered a question 500 times, but that person hasn't asked it 500 times. Being able to say, great question. Do you know where you could go to find it? And you would want them to say, oh, the operations manual. And then I might give them a clue. It's like in the middle of the manual, it's around the 40 to 60 page, mark. You could give them a clue, but you want your team to be able to find their information out independently. And then if they read it and it's not clear, that's your opportunity to work with your entire team to make sure that content is clear. So for instance, a family is terminating, but they didn't give you your required notice. In my case, it's 2 weeks. They didn't give 2-week notice. So, they give the sob story to the director. The director comes to you as the owner or exec director and says, can we make an exception? That's where I try to hold the line and say, let's read our policy. Did they follow everything in the policy? No, they didn't give the 2-week notice. Then I'll have them run an audit of the account, make sure everything is paid in full, and then try very hard to stick to our policy. If your directors are wanting to change a policy, that really should be either a discussion among everyone. What would we want to change it to? And why would we do that? And one of my catchphrases is always, in order to be fair to everyone. So I say to the director, in order to be fair to everyone, we have this policy 2 weeks. It takes you at least 2 weeks to find a replacement child usually. And so that's why we have a 2-week notice, for example. And so ops manual. There's some really fun ways to do an ops manual. Email me if you want me to tell you. Some of them are AI related, which I think is really fun. And then you'll want to make sure your contracts for your parents and staff are really buttoned up. I had a labor lawyer look at mine. I'm in Virginia, so I had someone look at Virginia law and then regular labor law to button mine up a little bit. Depending on your state, most states are hire and fire at will. So they really don't mean as much, but I still like to do a contract and put in writing, that I expect them to follow our policies and so on. So, in general, that would be something a buyer would look at and want to know. Typically, buyers will really treat your staff great. Well, they always should, but I've never known a buyer that Hinge has worked with that has not been wonderful on transitioning to the team. They don't change their pay. Typically, it'll be even raised a little bit, and they'll usually have more benefits because they're probably bigger than a 1 or 2 location school. So buyers bend over backwards to accommodate the teachers and to not change pay rates for parents, tuition rates for parents, and so on. Something else you want to have in place, and this is where Playground is really helpful. And I was looking at Benny's dashboard yesterday, and I said, oh my gosh, I love the way I can see exactly how much I've billed someone and what they owe. It's very like user friendly, bold, it's pretty. And then as a director, I could click on and figure out what my next steps are. And again, I only got a 3-minute version, but it was awesome. Then you want your financial systems buttoned up. So having Playground or a similar system, but again, I'm saying I loved what I saw for Playground. Buttoned up for a buyer is amazing. Sometimes they'll even want to go in and look at the system, which is great too. That's up to you. And then your customer relationship. How are you acquiring customers? Really having that buttoned up. Then I would add things like making sure website is up to date, making sure all your procedures match. So does the parent handbook match what your website says that matches what the contract says? And that's when my team is really helpful for me. Wait a minute, we don't say it the same way in the parent handbook. Oops, take the content, let's edit, wordsmith a little bit, and then make sure everything matches. That's a really helpful, again, good use of your middle bench. Okay, and the next slide, again, proper planning, preventing poor performance, documenting. So a buyer would want to know that you're being honest and straightforward about your situation. So you would want to make sure your bank statements are all in one place. If you go to list and then sell, there's so many little things that you can do ahead of time, which is some of the things I'm explaining now, so that when you're in the process, and it will feel a bit emotional for most people, you've got everything ready to go. Our diligence team is amazing, led by our gal, one of my favorites, Carrie Pergerson. Got a great team that does that, but really having everything buttoned up so you're not going and looking. Like for me, I own my buildings and I have leases for all of them. If you ask me to go find my leases right this minute, I'd have to think where they are. Having them downloaded, uploaded, downloaded, and all ready to go is really helpful. Making sure they're current and up to date. I've owned my buildings, so I lease from myself, so that's kind of easy. But if you lease from a third party, that's really important. And then the last couple slides, I'm going to talk about, actually, this might be our last, I've got one more slide. And that'll give us a few minutes for questions also. The process. So how does a process of selling work? And this is the Hinge process. So in general, you'll meet someone like me at a conference or on a webinar, or you've attended something and you become familiar with us. You're following us on YouTube or our website and so on, and you become familiar. The first step is always evaluation. Let's see how you look. Let's see. And we've got about 350 different buyers. Let me tell you that for a minute. So it could be a regional buyer, somebody that might have 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 schools in your area that wants to add to their platform. Someone that's a regional buyer would be probably familiar with maybe your brand, but certainly familiar with your demographics and your area. Then you've got, and those are really good options for 1 or 2, 3 schools. The next one would be what we call strategic. So that would be what you would call a chain, maybe like a KinderCare or a Cadence, a program like that. So they're also going to be very familiar with your demographics, and they're going to have a growth plan. Their people maybe need to add 5 more schools this quarter, and the timing is everything on something like that. So that would be a buyer. We also have buyers that are international, and this is really interesting since COVID. The buyers, the private equity groups that are coming in and buying maybe the regional platforms and growing them to a national brand. The last one would be franchises. And sometimes I'm seeing franchises buying 1 or 2 site locations as well. And so lots of nuances and interesting tidbits about each of those. But we work with all of them to figure out, after the valuation, we always go unpriced to the market. So we'll send out what's called an OM, an offering memorandum. And the OM will not give a lot of detailed information because it's confidential. once, so it might be Mid-Atlantic, 5 location, childcare center, highly successful. Maybe it might say their revenue, range. And then if a buyer is interested, they will sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, and then they will get the full OM offering memorandum that gives all the details. So we do a teaser first. Sorry to clarify, a teaser goes out with not much information. They sign the NDA, then we send the offering memorandum, complete with pictures. It's gorgeous. And then letters of intent come in. I would like to maybe tour the school, or I know I would offer XYZ range. And then our brokers, advisors take it from there. And typically it's, 6-month-ish process. Sometimes it's a little shorter than that. You always have an option of who would be looking at your school. The owner is always in the driver's seat. And as a fellow owner, that's really important to me. Again, it's about 6-ish month process. And then you plan your next steps. And lots of times people, this is really funny. Sometimes people come right back into the industry and start another brand. And sometimes people are at the beach right now as we speak, while we're all getting ready for fall. And sometimes people pivot and go into something similar in early childhood, but a little different, using their expertise and years of experience. And that's a fairly a wrap on, I'm not sure if there's other content on the other slides. Yep, here we are. That's a wrap. I'm able to take questions or certainly respond to emails. And I know Benny went in a couple minutes. Sorry, Benny.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. Thank you so much for all that content. Very insightful. If people have questions, you can shoot them into the chat, or I can go ahead and unmute you guys so that you can ask as well. Kathe, I have a couple questions, and I'm curious, for a single site provider, I know you mentioned it's important to stay at capacity, working at full capacity. What do you see as a sweet spot for capacity and enrollment numbers? How many kids does the optimal childcare business sell for?
Oh, how many kids? That is really hard to answer. It depends on the demographics. So if you're in like Texas, fast growth area, Atlanta, I'm going to pick on again and say fast growth. I'm going to highlight, not pick on. There's certain areas, Raleigh, North Carolina, certain areas that are like booming. So they're going to be probably more full in terms of enrollment, but they're also going to be very sought after, because it depends. Remember, I said all the different groups of potential buyers, they're definitely looking for different things. I had one of the groups call me not too long ago and say, what do you have in North and South Dakota? And I'm thinking, whoa, that's where you want to grow to, but there's childcare deserts. And so when a group is looking, hey, I want to go to a childcare desert, a place that is very much underserved, what that tells me is they're probably wanting some subsidy care, and they're going to an unserved area. So it really depends. But in general, I always want to see you at 70% capacity, always. If you're smaller, you want to be more than that. After 70% for, let's call an average size center 100 kiddos. So if you've got 70, you should be able to put some of your revenue at the bottom line to grow. But every child after 70% in general would be helping your bottom line.
And is there a number of children? Is it dependent by location, the number of children that you think is, people should shoot towards to be ready to sell their business?
No, because remember I said California. So some of the 60 capacity ones in California, especially if they're a niche curriculum like a Montessori or Reggio or really good outdoor classroom, they're going to sell because their tuition is higher. So again, that's that P&L part. So you can be, I looked at one recently, and let's see, it was in like a very southern state, and they were capacity of like maybe 300, but they were not charging that much a week. So 300 capacity looked really good, but their P&L looked not as good because they couldn't charge as much. So it's really an art and a science. That's why you have to call me. And I can talk, individual situations through. If I don't know, of course, I'll put you in touch with one of our analysts or our brokers. Of course, because I don't pretend to do that part of it, but I can definitely point you in the right direction. That's a great question.
Wonderful. Any questions in the chat? We got no questions in the chat, and we are almost at time. So I want to just say thank you very much, Kathe, for joining us. We will definitely be looking forward to having you back with all the knowledge you bring. I'm sure there's much for people to learn. So thank you very much. We will send the recording out to everyone after the session concludes. And any questions you have, I will include Kathe's email. Kathe, if you can share over those resources, we will include them as well for people to use. So thank you very much. And thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.